Hello and welcome back to the Raven Nole Show. I'm your host, Raven C. Nole, and I am so glad that you decided to join me today. If you're new to the show, welcome. This is the space where we encourage multifaceted, multi-gifted women to thrive in your purpose and your gifts. And so today we have a special episode because we have an amazing guest with us, Jasmine. We're going to be diving into a topic that's incredibly relevant to so many of us, time management for the multi-gifted mom. So whether you're listening while driving, working out, find you a little moment of quietness amidst all the busyness, lean in because this conversation is going to be one that you don't want to miss. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Jasmine.
Thank you for having me. This is one of my favorite topics, so I'm excited to chat.
Awesome. Well, I'm so overjoyed to have you with me today. If you can just take a moment to introduce yourself to my listeners and just tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Jasmine Chanelle. I am a personal brand coach, most well known for my program Mom to Mogul, where I help moms turn their ideas into online coaching businesses. And so I have been a full entrepreneur now for almost 7 years, and it started because I became a mom. I wanted more freedom with my time. I wanted to be able to chaperone field trips and homeschool my kids and things like that. So I started this business, and it has grown to this successful platform now. And I just really enjoy helping women, step into the fullness of their purpose. So it's been an exciting journey. I'm a mom of three in Jacksonville, Florida.
All right. You got three little ones. I only got two.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
so I know juggling three is no joke. So
Definitely.
how old are your children? Are they stair steppers? Are there age gaps?
Yeah, so I have a 10-year-old, a 5-year-old, so that's the biggest gap, and then a 4-year-old. So those last two snuck up on me.
So when you started off with, having children, I'm sure it was a different, flow from going to one to two to three. What was that like for you? Did you get that initial, a lot of people talk about when you go from one child to two children, it's like, oh my God, this shock factor. But
Yeah.
how was it going from one to two to three?
Yeah, because my first two were so far apart in age, it was a 5-year gap in between them. It wasn't that big of a transition because my son was already transitioning into preschool when I had the little one. Now, the last two, in the midst of a middle of a pandemic, having a newborn and a toddler at the same time was something I could not have prepared for. It was a crazy transition, the lack of sleep, the potty training one and changing diapers of the other, and still trying to keep the school age child on task. That was a huge transition for me. And I feel like I really felt it with the stair steppers. So I know people say have them close together. I would not recommend. That 5-year gap definitely was a lot more enjoyable of a transition.
For sure. My two, my daughter she'll be 5 this year, and then my son will be 2 in November. And I said I'm in January, and I'm like, that's the gap. Like I can't do
Yeah.
anything closer together. So I totally understand that. So did you start off with, balancing it all, juggling it all, doing all the things? Did you already have a clear sense of how you were going to do that as a mom? Were you prepared, or were you kind of like thrown into this jungle of motherhood and you had to figure it out?
Yeah, so I thought I was prepared. I think many of us think that we are. It's like, okay, especially when I'm the oldest of three siblings. I'm like, oh, I've been, helping with child rearing most of my life. This is going to be a breeze. And I think motherhood just comes with a lot of unexpected demands that we are not, aware of. And that was part of the reason I started to share my journey on social media so candidly, is because I felt so many things were happening that nobody told me to expect when it came to trying to juggle a career, trying to, have kids. And then I'm also very present and hands on with my kids. So I want to do all the crafts. I want to learn like all I can learn about parenting and things like that. So I had these really high expectations for myself on trying to balance it all. And I realized there's no such thing as balance. I really had to give that ideal up. After being a mom for a couple years, I'm like, okay, we need to focus on harmony, not necessarily work-life balance, because balance is a myth when it comes to motherhood.
That is absolutely true. I totally agree. And I think that we think about, okay, how can I do this, and balance and give evenly right to everything?
Right.
But it's almost like that harmony of how does things flow, right? How can I maneuver through my day to day? So I know that you said that you have been an entrepreneur or had your own business for the last 7 years, but your oldest is 10 years old.
Mhm.
And so what did that look like with a 3-year-old, discovering that, there's this purpose in you of you wanted to start a business or you wanted to have that flexibility. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I always tell people he was the catalyst to me realizing that there were things beyond just my degrees. I never pictured myself as an entrepreneur. I love a good steady paycheck. I love having a 401k and health benefits. But the more the motherhood demanded of me, the more I realized that I kind of needed to choose. And for me, entrepreneurship just gave me that flexibility. And so it was
Mhm.
scary at first. I was using my nights and weekends to build. I was realizing that he was spending more time with his preschool teacher than he was with me every day because I would drop him off at 8, head to work, wouldn't pick him back up until almost 6. And so by the time bedtime and dinner time is done, he only had a couple hours each day with me. And so I really had to figure out like, okay, how can I become a stay-at-home mom was the ultimate goal in the beginning. So I just started to kind of figure out what would it cost me to walk away from this job? How much does the business need to make this feasible for me? But it was something that I kind of had to build the plan as I was living it. There was no blueprint, but thankfully I was kind of tracking my journey as I went. And that is what I ended up turning into a large portion of my business was what do the processes look like? What do the steps look like to balance this with your career and with your life as a mom? That's what became the Mom to Mogul program, essentially, because many of us have dreams, but we don't know how to fit it in these very finite, little boxes of time. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of how I started that journey of helping other women with the same thing.
So, what did it take for you as far as like, I know it, in order to step into something new, there's always this level of courage, right? That we
Mhm.
have to kind of step into because again, you're like, I like that steady paycheck.
Yeah,
I like to have a 401k to know that my future is secure. But
yeah.
then kind of stepping into the unknown of entrepreneurship and just having to build this new skill set, discover new gifts within you, really get more clear on where you're headed. What level of courage did that take for you to actually step into that? What did that look like? What were you facing? What did you have to battle internally to make that decision and to make that leap?
Yeah, so if I could have continued as just a side hustler and just using the business to make extra money on the side, I absolutely would have taken that easy, simpler path. But I came to a crossroads in my career where, a new boss was brought on. They were making it very difficult on me at the job. Up until that point, I had, built departments from the ground up. I always had exceeds expectations on my performance reviews. And within 30 days of this new boss being there, I was written up for like performance management
Wow.
and putting on a performance improvement plan. And I truly, genuinely believe that God had that situation happen because he knew I wouldn't have left on my own will. He knew I would have just stayed there. And so it just became a very high conflict at work. And the things that I was hired for and praised for on the front end were becoming things that I was criticized for on the back end. And so I started to kind of build my plan in the background and I'm like, okay, a year. I'll give myself a year to be able to quit. Well, within 60 days of making that 1 year plan, it was time to go. I found out I was pregnant with my second. And I'm like, okay, by the time I have this second baby, I'm not going to return from maternity leave. But God was just increasing the business so quickly that I was losing money by being at work. I was making more in my side business than I was making at work. And so I kind of was like, okay, I guess it's time to go from here. So it did take a lot of courage. It was definitely a faith journey for me because it wasn't the path that I pictured for myself. Like I said, I had no desire to be a
Mhm.
full-time entrepreneur. I had pursued my education with the idea of climbing the corporate ladder. And so it really was that high conflict situation, it not being a stable work environment anymore that caused me to make the decision. And then finding out I was pregnant with my second child. So I'm like, okay, time to go.
So, what was your conversation like with the Lord during that time? Because I know, it's like, okay, I'm feeling this thing, this work environment's not working. I want to be able to be more present with my children. What was that dialogue with, the Lord like? Did you speak to him about your fears? Did he talk to you about, what your impact would be in the entrepreneurial space? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so it was actually a interesting conversation because I didn't want to leave. I genuinely enjoyed the role. I enjoyed the job itself. It was literally just that one boss that I had an issue with, but the work itself, we were doing very impactful work in the community.
Okay.
It combined my education and my gifts very perfectly at that job. And so my conversation with God at the time was just like, I'm really confused And I said, in order for me to do this, I need clarity. And, the main pillar of my programs is clarity and confidence. I need this to be clear, guys. So you got to make it clear. And what began to happen is people would reach out to me for very simple things that weren't related to the business, but I was solving their problem literally in record time. So
Oh,
something that takes a business, 3 months to establish online, I was doing for them in 2 days. And
mm,
so it became crystal clear that this was a gifting beyond just my educational background. This was something that people were connecting to. They're calling me for advice. I was getting invited to speak on it. And so I think God made it clear by the fruit that was coming out of it because it was almost effortless. I wasn't doing a lot of work to make it happen and
mhm.
force it to happen. And so I took that as a sign of, okay, I'm moving in the right direction because there was this level of ease. And then I was graced for it. I had never spoken before that time. And then people were inviting me to speak on stage. And I would get up there and the message came out. So I'm like, okay, I'm graced for this. So let me lean into this direction and see. And I always tell guys, if you ever ask me to go back to work, I would do it. A lot of times it's a lot, easier. It would be much easier to do it
Yeah.
in that way, but so far he's continued to keep me through this journey. And so I just kind of go with it as I go along.
Yeah, that is the truth. It's kind of like, well, God, I'm following you, but if you want to take me down the easier route,
Right.
we can definitely go down that route. So, what was it like for you once you actually stepped into entrepreneurship, with having children? Because I know, with the corporate space, it's more so you got that 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Sometimes, when you're going to work, when you're getting off work, entrepreneurship, that's a whole different beast of, trying to navigate all the responsibilities. And it's really no one clocking your hours, right? You can really
Right.
just make your own flow and make your own hours. So, what was it like for you trying to determine how to set your priorities now that you had so much flexibility and you didn't have that structure of a 9 to 5 anymore?
Yeah, it was actually very difficult in the beginning because I was breastfeeding my second born. And so her and I were napping through the day. And it got to a point, it's like, okay, hold on, we need to do some work if this is going to be sustainable. And so I had to kind of just go back to a lot of my corporate training, go back to the things that I had learned, putting systems in place, making sure I had standard operating procedures that I'm following on a consistent basis, building routines that still allow me to keep the flexibility, and then really time blocking from a place of what is important, what are money generating activities. So I don't do any fluffy things in the business that makes it look like the business is running. I only
Mhm.
focus on things that actually generate revenue. And so being able to identify and prioritize, that was the main important thing. So a lot of times people spend a lot of times doing busy work in the business and it
Yeah.
feels like they're doing something, but those aren't the things that actually make you money. And so I started to learn how to decipher between the things that actually bring results and focus my limited time on that. And so having those different blocks of, okay, from this time to this time every day, I'm going to, do outreach. From this time to this time, I'm going to follow up on proposals and contracts. Having those processes in place really helped.
Good. Yeah, that's like amazing advice because I think that sometimes when we step into something new, you forget
Yeah.
that what you experienced previously, you can take those same skill sets
Yeah.
into, that new season and form whatever is necessary to keep you structured and keep you aligned. And I think that, for women who are moms and they want to step into more so of an entrepreneurial space or they want to pursue their purpose, but they're, trying to juggle all these different things, it can sometimes feel like, well, how do I do this and that,
Mhm.
right? And so for
Mhm.
you were able to actually take what you learned in that corporate space and bring it into, the entrepreneurial space as well. So what would you say were the particular habits or strategies that help you stay aligned? Because I know you said that, you would block off time and you would do this from this time and then you would create different structures for yourself. But what was those particular habits and strategies?
Yeah. So the first number one thing is establishing a morning routine. And
Mm,
it doesn't have to look how people make it look online, where you wake up at 5 a.m. and you do a 6 mile run. And for us as moms, we have to also be a little realistic around
yeah.
what this is going to look like. And so that morning routine was really more so for me to make sure I'm pouring into myself from a spiritual aspect, so that I'm ready to tackle whatever comes throughout the day. So that was the first habit, really having a devotional time, having some quiet time for me to think because, my kids were home with me as I was building, and so that was the first thing. The second thing was really having a practice around professional development, whether
Mm,
that's investing in coaching, whether that's reading books, whether that's listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos about a part of the business that maybe you don't understand yet, making that a daily practice was a big key game changer for me. So working on those leadership skills, learning more about, the digital space, all of those things were important. And then the third thing was really touching your business every single day. Don't treat it like a side hustle. So if
Mhm.
this is something you want to turn into full-time money, you got to give it a good amount of attention. So even if you only touch your business 10 minutes out of the day, make sure you touch it every single day. Do some type of activity towards it each day. And so that can look different. Some days it's going to be administrative tasks. Some days it may be, creating content, but making sure I was, had hands on, eyes on my business every day, that I wasn't leaving it up to chance. Those are the top three, habits I had to build in those early stages.
Yeah. And I think it's good to have, those structures, around your life to ensure that you are moving yourself forward. But I know at the same time, being a mom, listen, kids are unpredictable. Like
Yes.
some days you got a sick kid, you got kids waking up in the middle of the
Yeah.
night sometimes, you got extracurricular activities, school
Mhm.
stuff, all kind of stuff. And you get pulled in so many different directions, not to mention wanting to take care of your own self and make sure that
Right.
you're good spiritually, mentally, emotionally, if you
Mhm.
like to work out, all that type of stuff, right? And so it's kind of like you wear all these different hats. And sometimes you're going to drop the ball.
Yeah.
Sometimes things are not going to go the way that you would have hoped it would go or the way that you had planned it to go. So for you, especially as you were in a transitional season and you were going from the corporate space into entrepreneurship, or even when you were actually already kind of functioning in the entrepreneurial space, how did you extend grace to yourself when, it felt overwhelming, things didn't go as planned? What was that like for you?
So I had to remember the ultimate goal of why I built the business. And
Mhm.
so if they got sick, the reason why I built the business is so I'm accessible when they're sick. And so that's a big adjustment in the early stages though, because it feels like you're being unproductive or there's so much more I should be getting done. And I have to remind myself, even now, I built this so that when this happens, I'm available to them. I built this so that when the school calls me, like they have a fever and you have to pick them up right now, I can drop everything and go pick them up right now.
Yeah.
So you really, as a mom, have to redefine what success in business looks like for you. So when I first started, success was hitting the first six figures, trying to become a millionaire, selling this many programs. And then the more I've been in this journey, that's not what success looks like for me. It is the flexibility to pick up a sick child. It is, tomorrow I'm going to my daughter's field trip. It's the flexibility. Those are the markers that I use for success now. I don't use a lot of those original data points around money and achievement to measure my success. And so when you realign, this was a successful day because I was able to lay in bed and make soup for my youngest. That's a successful day. And so it allows you to give yourself more grace. And it also allows you to build a life that feels better to you and more aligned because these are the things you truly want. A lot of times
Mhm.
we're chasing the vanity metrics, the followers, and things like that. But if you really want what you really wanted was to be a more present mom, we can mark this day as a success, even if they, ran you crazy all day. You were a successful mom
Right.
today because you were there and present as they did it.
Exactly. I love that. So it's like really just redefining, like you said, what success is and not sometimes I think we just, social media can just really overwhelm you and make you feel like, I'm missing out on this, I'm missing out on that. But really being okay with saying, as a mom, it is my role, right? It is my responsibility to be present for my children. And so
Mhm,
if I'm able to do that, then I'm being successful, right?
mhm,
I'm showing up in how I'm supposed to be. Now, the other aspect of that, right, on the flip side is because you are taking care of children, because you are running a business, right? What does it look like for you to take care of your own well-being as well? Because, as a multifaceted woman, as a multi-gifted woman, you wearing all these hats, you're, maneuvering through all of these roles, you have to show up for your kids when they're sick, right? But then what about when I'm sick? What about when I'm not feeling my best and I got to show up online or I got to handle clients or I got to complete this admin work. What does that look like for you with taking care of your overall well being as a multifaceted woman?
Yeah, so it looks like again a daily practice. We have to remember how much we're pouring when we are multidimensional like this. We're
Mm-hmm.
consistently pouring into people, whether that's at your job, in your business, at home, in your marriage. You're consistently pouring. So having ways that fill you up. For some people, that may be, working out. For some people, making sure you have a hobby. What I realized is my hobby was the business, and so I had to find a hobby that is not connected to any level of achievement. Find a
Yeah.
hobby just for the sake of, being new at something. So I started going to candle making classes and taking tennis lessons and, allowing yourself to explore things that maybe you liked as a child, but you don't have time to do it. Reading is a form of self-care. But
Mhm.
again, my reading was attached to personal development. I was only reading books about business. And so I had to rework that as well too. And then the other thing, and I swear by this process, is I take momcations. So once a quarter, I go to a hotel by myself, no kids, no one else, and I spend the weekend either watching different shows, reading a new book, or just time with me and God, in those times to kind of refresh, recalibrate, re strategize for, what's coming next. And so taking those momcations, I took my first one in 2020 because of the pandemic. Everybody was home, the kids were home, my husband was home, and I was like, oh no. And so since 2020, I've taken one every single quarter. And it doesn't have to be you fly to some exotic island. You could pick a hotel in the city that you're in, but just allow yourself to be off the clock as a mom. You're not cooking any meals for anybody. You're not thinking about what people need. You're really just pouring into yourself. And then another way that I take care of myself was honestly starting therapy. In 2020, when I was pregnant with my third child, I'm like, I don't want to mess these kids up, Lord. You have entrusted them to me. I feel like I've, read all the books that I can read, but I think there's more things that I need, more tools in my toolbox. And
Mhm.
so starting therapy really allowed me to meet me for the
Mhm.
first time. Me outside of, the achievements. I've been a high achiever from a very young age. Outside of all these things that I thought made me who I was, therapy allowed me to meet me as an individual and as a woman. And now I get to cultivate how that woman shows up because I know her. And a lot of times we are disconnected from that version of us because we're working. We only know ourselves as the wife, the mom, the employee. We don't know ourselves as the individual we are. We know who we are to other people. And I always challenge women, when you introduce yourself, don't introduce yourself as mom first. My name is Christy. I'm a mom. Like, who are you outside of the roles that you play is going to be important because that's going to tell you how connected or how much time you're actually spending with yourself.
I think that's so good. The first thing you said I thought was amazing was the momcation, okay? Because listen, we need time, okay? Because
Yes.
these kids, they be challenging us.
Yes.
So I think, being able to have that time and really create that space intentionally, right? Because it's not a second thought or I'll get to it or it just happened by happenstance, but intentionally carving out that time to say, I'm important, right?
Right.
My well-being is important. Me being full of filled up is important, right? Me being the best that I can be for my home and my environment is important. And then I also love that you said about therapy and meeting yourself, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of women don't take the time to meet the new version of themselves after they have children because you're
Yeah.
not that same woman you were
Mhm.
pre babies. You are not that same individual, and life can go so fast that you don't slow down and actually introduce yourself to the new you, right? What do I like now? What's important to me now? What fills my tank now? Right? And just doing that necessary work. But I don't think any of that could work without creating boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Boundaries around your
Mhm.
time, boundaries around your well being. So, what boundaries did you put in place and how did you enforce those for yourself?
Yeah, so the biggest one, because I was a chronic overworker in the early stages of business, and I gave myself a pass for because I'm like, oh, I'm trying to get this to six figures. I gave myself a pass for like overworking. But in 2021, I had to set some boundaries. Like the business was moving so fast that I was about to burn out. And I actually lost my grandmother, and grief set me all the way down.
Oh, wow.
Like it set me completely down. And so I really reevaluated, like, okay, what's truly important for me? And so in the business and personal relationships, friendships, everything, I said, okay, if something is not absolutely yes, then it's a no. And so
Mm,
I only say yes to things that are absolutely yes, I would love to do this. If there's any inkling that, oh, I don't kind of want it, I don't know, it's a no because I don't want to have to cancel that plan later. One.
right.
And then also we fill ourselves up with busy work and there's a lot of, things that we say yes to that maybe we don't necessarily exactly want to do, but we feel like we should. And so I took the pressure or the mom guilt out of the things I felt like I should do and only
Mhm.
focus on the things that I needed to do and that I wanted to do. And
Mm-hmm.
so what that looks like was if a friend invited me to something and I didn't really want to go, I said, hey girl, I'll send you a gift, but I won't be there. Or,
Yeah.
people invited me to speak at different conferences. If it wasn't aligned with where the brand was going long term or the shifts that I was making, it was a no.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was a paid thing, clients who, were maybe not a good fit for the transition that I was making in business, I had to say no. So there's some things you have to say no to in order to set boundaries. And the other thing we have to remember is like boundaries are for us, not for other people.
Yeah.
And so you get to decide what the boundary looks like. You have to communicate it to people, but they don't have to accept it.
Yeah.
It's up to you to enforce the boundary. So I don't answer business calls after a certain time. I stopped instantly replying to people. That was like a
Mm-hmm.
marker in my business. Somebody sent me a DM or an email, I was the person that instantly replied to stuff all the time because, like, oh, I'm not doing anything. This is my job. I do this all day. And
Mm-hmm.
I just gave so many people direct access because of that process. And I'm like, oh, no. So that was one of the other ways I set boundaries. Like,
Yeah.
I don't answer DMs all day anymore. I don't, take every single speaking engagement, every single call. I'm really particular. And so for you to set clear boundaries, you have to get clear about what your values are. And if
Mm-hmm.
something isn't aligned with your value, which my number one value is freedom, I had to get rid of it if it didn't align with freedom. If it felt like it was taking away my freedom, it couldn't go with me in this new season.
Yeah, I love that. I think we don't necessarily take the time out to determine what we value, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to really
Mm-hmm.
name it, right?
Right.
We can think we know, we can
Mm-hmm.
flow with it, but to actually sit down and say, what are my actual values? And how can I ensure that the things I am giving an absolute yes to, right, align with those values? So I love that you said that. And I think, as being moms, sometimes we can sacrifice ourselves.
Yeah.
We can sacrifice ourselves and it's just like a second nature thing, but just really realizing just how important you are, in this
Yeah.
process and that you are literally the foundation that's holding all this together,
All of
your
it. Yeah.
kids, your business, all that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be very intentional. So I
Yeah.
love
And
that
I
you,
think we have to set boundaries with our kids too. So this is something I talk to a lot of my
definitely.
clients about because they're like, oh, my kids interrupt me. I can't work. I can't work. At a certain age, you have to communicate boundaries to them because what we have to realize, especially when we have daughters, is we are modeling motherhood for them.
Hmm.
And so if you're the self-sacrificing, always giving, never setting a boundary with your kid mom, your daughter is going to be that same over giving, over pouring mom. And so it
Hmm.
can be kind, it can be age appropriate. I'll say, no, mommy's working. We can set the timer, but at this time we can go
Yeah.
do X, Y, and Z. So communicating it clearly. And so I've noticed that my kids set very appropriate boundaries because they've seen me model that process. They don't just get to bust in my room if I'm working, they know the knock. They know that okay, mommy's on the call from this time to this time, but after that, she's gonna be hands on with us. And so
Hmm.
even communicating to them, healthy boundaries is gonna be key.
I love that you highlighted that because you don't hear many people say that, right? You don't
Mhm.
get to say, hey, I need to model what healthy boundaries are even to my
Yeah.
children. And
Mhm.
not just when it comes to other people, but when it comes to them. That is
Yeah.
a good one. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
think that that's amazing. So, what advice would you give other moms who are trying to, have that harmony? I love that you use that word with the different roles that they have and they feel that they want to explore different areas in their life, their purpose, their gifting. What would you say to them and any practical steps that you would give them to start?
Yeah, the first thing is getting clear about your values because when your emotions are in the way, when circumstances are changing, it's very hard to make confident, courageous decisions
Mhm.
from that place. And so your values are something that are usually solid for people. Your values aren't changing every day, whereas these other circumstances can be fluid. So getting clear about what your values are and then matching your decisions to those values. So if your value is family, your life should reflect that your value is family. You can't say that's the value and then you keep picking up overtime shifts. That is why you feel out of alignment is
Yeah.
because the value, your actions are not aligned with the values. That's the first thing. Get really clear about those values. The second thing is just like sit down and really ask God, what is this plan and purpose for you? Because a lot of times our frustration and our burnout comes because we are doing things that God did not ask us to do or we're
Mhm.
carrying things that he did not ask us to carry. So an activity I have them do at Momcation is like, what is on your to-do list and what is on God's to-do list? If these things you can't change in the next, 30 days, put it on God's to-do list and stop thinking about it. Stop thinking about world hunger because you're not going to be able to change that. And the next year, you're thinking about, things that are very far down the line. We need to put that on God's to-do list and focus on the last thing he told us to do. So
Mhm.
that's the second thing, getting clear about your values, taking some stuff off your list and putting it on God's to-do list. And then the third thing is really beginning to walk in alignment with the things that you say that you want. If
Mm.
you say that you want a healthier lifestyle, that lifestyle is not going to show up on your porch. You have
Yep.
to stop buying the things that don't align with that lifestyle. You have to
Mhm.
stop, going to the restaurants. And I'm guilty of this too. Like going to the restaurants that don't align with that person you say that you want to be. Because the behaviors of you constantly breaking promises to yourself is going to just keep that cycle going if you're not accomplishing the things that you desire.
I love that. I love that. We got to make sure that when we give something a yes to our value system, that we really make sure that our actions align with that yes as well. So that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Jasmine, for this conversation today. Very insightful. I can see your heart for moms. I can see your heart for this work, and you are a fantastic communicator when it comes to really helping moms maneuver through that harmony. I loved it. So thank you so much for sharing and being so authentic about your journey as a multi-gifted mom. I know that our listeners can resonate with the challenges, with the changes, with the ups and downs that
Yeah.
come with motherhood and trying to pursue purpose at the same time. So, I really just loved how you highlighted the importance of values, right? And that how you create boundaries, you create systems, structures around those value systems. So, Jasmine, before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or words of encouragement that you want to give any of the women that may be listening?
Yeah, definitely. The biggest thing I always like to leave with moms is like we have to be very cognizant of the power that God has placed in our hands by giving us access to children. I know motherhood can feel heavy and burdensome, but it's an assignment. And so really beginning to look at it as an assignment and building some alignment around that is what's going to help you feel that power as you're doing it. So you can not grow weary and well doing when it comes to motherhood, because we won't get to see the fruit until they're adults,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So yeah, my encouragement to moms, like, take care of you so that you can be the best mom that you can to them. And so you guys can stay connected with me over on Instagram. That's where I spend most of my time. It's @_ Jasmine Chanelle. You can learn more about my services and the Momcation Retreat I host each year at jasminechanelle.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jasmine, for sharing your heart and wisdom with us today. To our listeners, if today's episode resonated with you, we would love to hear from you. Comment below this video or send me a message with your thoughts and takeaways. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Remember, managing it all is possible with harmony, okay? With harmony. So you've got this. Thank you for rocking with me today. Until next time, keep thriving and making an impact.